When the industry turned its back on Anna and the headlines shredded her reputation, she quietly braced herself to fall alone. But just as the noise grew unbearable, Keanu stepped into the spotlight beside her, risking his own image to defend her name and change the story. Let me tell you how it really began, because the headlines never got this part right. It didn't start with a scandal or a tweet or a red carpet moment. It started in a dusty training warehouse on the edge of the city, long before the cameras rolled. Anna was there before sunrise, hair tied back, face bare, hands wrapped in tape that was already peeling at the edges. She moved through the fight choreography again and again, her breath sharp in the cold air each time her body hit the crash mat. The stunt team shouted out numbers: 3, roll, elbow, spin, and she followed like music, each move cleaner than the last. When she missed a step, she didn't blame the floor or the stunt double or the director. She laughed, shook out her bruised wrists, and asked, "One more time, please?" There was nothing glamorous about it. Just sweat, bruises, and a quiet kind of hunger that didn't need anyone's permission to exist. He arrived late by comparison, walking in with a motorcycle helmet under his arm and an apologetic half-smile that reached his eyes before his lips. Keanu greeted every person in the room by name: the coordinator, the new stunt guy who still looked starstruck, the makeup assistant carrying a box twice her size. When he reached Anna, she was on the mat, flat on her back, staring up at the ceiling after a brutal fall practice. "You good?" he asked, leaning over her, his hair falling forward. "I mean emotionally. The ground seems upset with you." She burst out laughing, the sound echoing in the empty warehouse, and for a moment the weight of the big-budget film, the expectations, the hidden pressure, all vanished in a shared joke. Their days blurred into a routine of training, rehearsals, and late-night table reads. Between takes, Anna would tease him about the way he always checked every cable and rigged twice before a stunt, like a worried older brother who still did his own crazy jumps. He'd counter by pretending to be offended every time she beat him to a punch combination. "You're supposed to miss at least one," he'd complain. "I have a reputation to protect." On set, they were a strange mix of intensity and playfulness. Her sharp focus, his calm presence, both of them building a chemistry that wasn't about gossip or rumors, just two people trying to tell a story and not get broken in the process. But good chemistry doesn't protect you from the outside world. The first headline landed like a stone dropped into still water. A grainy photo of Anna walking off set alone, taken after a 14-hour day, twisted into a story about her storming away in anger. Within days, one rumor became 5. Anonymous sources said she was difficult, demanding the reason the schedule was slipping. Clips of her laughing with crew members were edited to look like eye rolls. Online comments turned cruel. People who had never met her decided who she was from a single freeze frame and a few angry words in bold font. The atmosphere on set shifted so gradually it was almost invisible at first. Conversations stopped when she entered a room. Jokes that once made everyone laugh now felt forced, or they didn't happen at all. A couple of producers started addressing notes through her, talking to the director instead of to her face. The PR team advised her to stay quiet, to let it pass, as if silence could clean a stain that wasn't hers. She smiled through it, told everyone she was fine, cracked jokes when the cameras were rolling. But the way she held her shoulders a little tighter, the way her eyes darted to see who was watching before she spoke, that was a different story, one no headline cared to print. One night after a brutal shoot that ended close to midnight, the studio lot was almost empty. The rain had just stopped, leaving the asphalt shining under the few remaining lights. Anna stepped out of stage 4 alone, clutching her bag and a folded script whose corners were soft from being held too tightly. From the shadow of a nearby trailer, Keanu watched her walk toward the far end of the lot, away from the busy exit, toward the little-used stairway that led up to the rooftop of the parking garage. He hadn't meant to follow. He'd just been gathering his things, helmet in hand, when he saw her shoulders trembling in a way no one shows when they know they're being seen. Something in him wouldn't let it go. He climbed the stairs a minute later and found her standing at the edge of the rooftop, not dangerously close, but close enough that the city lights reflected in the tears on her face. She was talking to herself in a low, broken whisper, the kind of voice people use when they no longer expect anyone to listen. If I defend myself, they'll say I'm dramatic. If I stay quiet, they'll say it must be true, she murmured, knuckles white around the script. I'm not this person they're writing about. I'm not. The wind tugged at the pages in her hand until one finally tore free, swirling out into the night like a small, fragile piece of everything she'd worked for. Keanu stood there in the doorway, unseen, heart hammering, staring at the woman the world had decided to misunderstand. And in that suspended second, between stepping forward and turning away, he knew that whatever he chose to do next would change both of their lives. The rooftop choice. Rain still clung to the edge of the concrete when Keanu stepped out onto the rooftop, his boots making a soft scrape against the wet floor. Anna didn't turn at first. The city below was a blur of lights and noise that felt far away from the tight, aching silence inside her chest. He stopped a few steps behind her, giving her space, his voice quiet but steady. "You know," he said, "the first time they lied about me, I tried to fight every sentence. I almost forgot who I was, trying to correct people who didn't care about the truth." She swiped at her eyes with the back of her hand and forced a crooked smile over her shoulder. "That's supposed to make me feel better." Her voice broke on the last word, and the sarcasm she aimed at him fell flat between them. He walked to her side, resting his arms on the low wall, looking out at the city instead of at her. "No," he answered. "It's supposed to tell you you're not crazy. What they're saying, it's noise. Loud, ugly noise, but it's not you." The wind tugged at her hair, and the weight of being misunderstood pressed so hard against her ribs she could barely breathe. "They don't see what you see," she whispered. "They'll never know how hard I'm trying. They just decided I'm the villain because it sells." For a long moment he said nothing, just listened to her breathing shake. Then he told her something she had never heard in any interview, something few people knew. Years ago, on another movie, a younger actress had gone through the same type of media storm. Rumors, edited photos, cold shoulders from the people who were supposed to protect her. Keanu had seen it, felt it wasn't right, and still he'd stayed quiet, trapped in his own fear of risking everything he'd worked for. "I watched her sink," he said softly. "Career disappeared. She left the business. And every time I see your face on some twisted headline, I remember that I did nothing back then. I won't repeat that mistake with you." Anna hugged the script to her chest like a shield. "You can't fix this," she said, shaking her head. "They'll just drag you down with me. They'll say you're biased or in love or whatever they need to say to sell another article." The word love hung in the air between them, fragile and unclaimed. He didn't flinch. "Let them guess," he answered. "What they say about me is their problem. What I do about you standing up here, thinking you're alone, that's mine." His voice wasn't dramatic, just solid, the kind of calm that made it hard to argue. To break the heaviness, he suddenly stepped back and dropped into a loose fighting stance, shadowboxing the cold air with exaggerated seriousness. "All right," he said. "New choreography, block, duck, roll away from the toxic comments." He mimed swatting invisible headlines out of the sky, spinning like a clumsy dancer until she couldn't help it. She laughed, a real laugh this time, loud and surprised. He grinned, a little out of breath on purpose, and pointed at her. "There, that's you." "Not the stuff down there," he nodded toward the city, "or on their screens. Just this person right here with the terrible rooftop lighting and the refusal to give up." They walked down together, the stairwell echoing with their footsteps, the mood lighter but not fixed. At the studio gate, the calm shattered under a sudden burst of flashing lights. A cluster of paparazzi had been waiting, tipped off by someone who knew their schedules too well. Questions were fired like bullets. Anna, is it true you're impossible to work with? Keanu, are you protecting her because you're involved? Did she delay the entire production? She froze, hand tightening around the strap of her bag. Before she could decide whether to run or answer, Keanu stepped slightly in front of her, not shielding her completely, just enough to share the line of fire. He raised a hand, not angry, just firm. "You're talking about a person, not a storyline," he said, looking directly at one of the cameras. "She shows up early. She trains harder than any of us. She treats people kindly. That's who she is on this film. Print that." From the corner of her eye, Anna saw the studio publicist rushing toward them, her face pale with panic as she hissed his name like a warning. And as the flashbulbs exploded around them, Anna realized that with a single sentence, he might have just crossed an invisible line that neither of them could step back over. The price of taking sides. The next morning, the studio conference room felt colder than any rooftop. Keanu sat at one end of the long glass table, helmet resting beside his folded hands, while three executives and a lawyer clicked pens and scrolled through their tablets. On one of the screens, there was already a freeze frame of him defending Anna at the gate, his jaw set, her face half hidden behind his shoulder. "We appreciate your passion," one executive began in a smooth, professional tone, "but off-the-cuff statements can create liabilities. The narrative is sensitive right now." What he heard underneath was simpler. "You broke the rule. You weren't supposed to pick a side." He didn't argue or raise his voice. He just listened, nodding slowly as they reminded him of contracts, brand images, international markets. When they finally paused, he leaned forward. "You hired her because she's good," he said quietly. "You know that, so if she's good enough to carry your movie, she's good enough to defend when people lie about her. If we don't stand by our own team, what are we doing?" A brief, uncomfortable silence settled over the room. The lawyer cleared his throat. "We're asking that, moving forward, you let the official PR channels handle any questions regarding Anna or the situation." The word situation made her sound like a traffic jam. Keanu exhaled slowly, the corners of his mouth tightening. "I'll always respect the film," he replied, "but I won't pretend she's invisible." On set, the tension was thick enough to feel. Some crew members greeted Anna more warmly now, emboldened by his public support. Others avoided eye contact completely, afraid of being pulled into something bigger than their pay grade. The day's main sequence was a high-stakes action scene, a controlled car slide, shattered sugar glass, and a precise mark she had to hit within a heartbeat. The stunt coordinator went over the plan twice, then a third time at her request. She could feel the nerves vibrating under her skin like electricity. "We're cutting it close on time," one producer muttered, checking his watch. "Do we really need another rehearsal?" Anna opened her mouth, then hesitated, already labeled difficult in half the blogs out there. Keanu stepped in before the words could turn against her. "We absolutely do," he said, his voice calm but unmovable. "We rehearse until everyone feels safe. That's the job." The producer didn't like it, but no one wanted to argue with the franchise's biggest star while the cameras were rolling nearby. They ran the sequence again, wheels skidding, glass rigged to explode on impact, every beat marked in tape and chalk. On the real take, everything seemed to go smoothly until it didn't. The car hit its mark. The glass burst in a sparkling shower. Anna rolled exactly where she was supposed to. And then a metal light rig, loosened by the vibration, began to tilt with a low, sickening groan. She heard someone yell, but the sound was swallowed by the chaos of the scene. The rig broke free faster than anyone expected, metal and cables swinging down toward where she was pushing herself up from the floor. Later, people would argue about whether there had been time to react. In the moment, there was only instinct. Keanu moved without thinking, sprinting across the set, diving low. He grabbed Anna around the waist and yanked her sideways just as the rig crashed down where her head had been, sparks leaping as it slammed against the concrete. Pain exploded across his shoulder as his body took the brunt of the fall. The entire room froze. For one endless second, all the rumors, the headlines, the whispers evaporated into something simple and terrifying. They could have lost her. Medics rushed in, radios crackled, the director shouted for a cut that had already happened in everyone's minds. Anna's hands were shaking as she pushed herself up on her elbows. "Are you okay?" she asked, voice hoarse. Keanu winced, trying to roll his shoulder. "I've had worse from bad reviews," he joked weakly, but the way his face tightened when he moved told the truth. Someone had filmed the whole thing on their phone, the fall, the impact, his tackle that turned a disaster into a near miss. The stunt coordinator argued with the producer in low, heated tones about safety checks. The publicist, pale and rattled, was already on the phone, saying words like contain, no leaks, and we can't let this look like negligence. At the hospital, they insisted on scanning his shoulder. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Anna sat in the corner of the small exam room, twisting a bottle of water between her hands until the plastic crinkled. "This is my fault," she said finally, the guilt spilling out. "If I wasn't here, you wouldn't be taking hits meant for me. If you step back, they'll stop looking for ways to hurt me through you." He turned his head on the pillow to look at her, a soft smile touching the edges of his mouth despite the obvious pain. "You being here is the only thing that makes any of this worth it," he said simply. "And I didn't take a hit meant for you. I took a hit because you're my partner in this film, that's all." The doctor came in, explained that nothing was broken, only badly bruised, but he should rest the arm for a while. Rest wasn't on the schedule. As they stepped into the hallway, his agent hurried toward them, phone in hand, eyes filled with the kind of stress that wasn't about injuries. "We have a problem," he said, falling into step beside them. "There's talk upstairs about restructuring the film. They're discussing trimming Anna's scenes, shifting focus so the marketing doesn't have to fight the controversy. And they're worried about your public positioning." The word tasted sour. Anna felt the ground shift under her feet. "They want you to distance yourself," the agent added quietly to Keanu. "For your own protection, for awards, for future deals. They think if you stop talking about her, this will blow over." Keanu glanced at Anna, saw the way her shoulders folded inward like a shield, and for the first time since the rooftop, there was anger in his eyes instead of just calm. He didn't answer his agent right away. He let the silence stretch, heavy and sharp, as he realized the cost of what he was about to decide, and that whatever path he chose, there would be no going back. Breaking the script. Days later, the closed-door meeting felt less like a conversation and more like a carefully staged scene where his lines had already been written for him. The executives spoke in measured tones, sliding charts and projections across the table as if numbers could erase bruises and sleepless nights. "We're all on the same team here," one of them said, smiling with a kind of warmth that never quite reached his eyes. "We just need to protect the bigger picture, the franchise, the brand. You understand, right?" Keanu listened, hands folded, that same quiet patience on his face. But beneath it, something had shifted. He had seen how close they'd come to disaster. He had watched Anna almost be crushed and then nearly erased in the same breath. When they finished explaining how reducing her screen time would streamline the story and ease international markets, he spoke, each word deliberate. "You're asking me to benefit from a lie," he said. "You want me to stand in front of the cameras and pretend everything is fine while you cut down the person who's done nothing but show up and work." The room tensed. Another executive tried to soften it. "We're not cutting her down, we're adapting. Perception matters. Audiences are sensitive." Keanu's gaze didn't waver. "Audiences are smarter than you think," he replied. "And so are the people who work for you." They reminded him, politely but firmly, of his contractual obligations. They mentioned future projects, hinted at what could quietly disappear if he refused to cooperate. He left the room with the same calm expression. But as the door closed behind him, the choice he'd been circling finally locked into place. Across town, the training warehouse echoed with the rhythmic thud of Anna's fists against the heavy bag. Sweat dripped down her neck, her knuckles raw under the tape. Every punch carried a word she couldn't say out loud to the people making decisions about her life. Unfair, ungrateful, scared. She imagined the film without her scenes, her character flattened into a background shadow. She pictured Keanu pressured into silence because of her, and something inside her twisted. Maybe walking away would save him. Maybe disappearing from this project would let him keep everything he'd earned. The thought burned her throat like smoke. The door creaked open mid-combination, and she spun, breathing hard. Keanu stood there, shoulders still slightly stiff, helmet dangling from his good hand. There was no studio entourage, no publicist, just him. "They want to cut you," he said without preamble. She swallowed, nodding once as if she'd already heard it in her bones. "Then let them," she answered, voice hoarse. "You don't need this mess attached to your name. You've worked too long to have it all tangled up with mine." She tried to smile, but it came out thin. "I'll be fine. I started with nothing. I can start again." Walked closer, stopping a few feet away, giving her room even in this conversation. "I'm not afraid of my name being next to yours," he said. "What scares me is looking back at this moment and knowing I had a chance to do the right thing and chose my comfort instead." He let that hang there, not as a lecture, but as a confession. She looked at him, really looked, past the movie star armor and into the stubborn kindness underneath. "You can't fight the entire machine," she whispered. "You'll get crushed." He gave a small, almost boyish shrug. "Maybe, but I've done enough movies to know something. Sometimes the only way out of a bad script is to improvise." He told her his plan in simple terms. There was a global press junket scheduled in a few days, a long row of cameras, microphones, and carefully curated talking points. The studio wanted light banter, action stories, nothing serious. Instead, he intended to talk about her work, her discipline, her humanity. Not a dramatic speech, just steady truth repeated often enough that the narrative couldn't ignore it. Anna shook her head, heart pounding. "They'll shut you down. They'll cut the interviews. They'll say you're difficult, too." He smiled, the lines at the corners of his eyes deepening. "Then we can be difficult together." Something in her chest loosened, equal parts terror and gratitude. The junket was a carefully controlled circus. Bright banners, rows of journalists, the soft click of cameras adjusting focus. Anna sat in the chair beside him, makeup flawless, expression calm, every inch the professional they refused to see. The first few questions were safe. Stunt training, favorite scene, funny onset mishaps. Then a reporter leaned forward, eyes sharp. "There have been a lot of stories about tension on set, particularly involving Anna," she said. "How did that affect the production?" The publicist standing off-camera tensed, ready to cut in. Keanu spoke before she could. "It affected us," he said, "because we saw how quickly people will tear down someone they don't know." The room went a little quieter. He went on, not raising his voice, just telling the kind of truth that doesn't need volume. He talked about coming to set before sunrise and finding Anna already there, sweating through fight choreography. He described how she stayed late to rehearse scenes with younger stunt performers so they'd feel comfortable. How she learned the crew's names, brought coffee on long nights, apologized when she thought she'd stepped on someone's toes even when she hadn't. "You're asking about tension," he finished. "For me, the real tension is between who she actually is and who some people decided she must be because it made a better headline." The reporter looked stunned. The publicist tried to guide the conversation away, but it was too late. The quote was out, recorded, streaming live in half a dozen countries. Across the world, people watching the feed saw something that didn't fit neatly into their pre-written narratives. A man using his spotlight not to shine brighter himself, but to illuminate someone else. Anna sat beside him, hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes glistening. She didn't cry, not there, not in front of them. But every word landed like a quiet apology from the universe for all the times she'd been made small. After the panel, as they walked off stage, the publicist rushed up, whispering about damage control and spin. Keanu just nodded politely, as if she were talking about the weather. That night, in a tiny apartment thousands of miles away, a junior camera operator who had been on set the day of the accident stared at his phone, thumb hovering over the upload button. He had footage the world had never seen. Anna laughing with crew between takes, helping a shaken extra redo a stunt, Keanu pulling her out from under the falling rig, the panic that followed. No CGI, no editing, just raw reality. He thought about the way people had spoken about her online, the things they'd said as if she couldn't hear them. Then he thought about the man on the junket stage saying, "You're talking about a person." He took a breath, hit upload, and watched the progress bar crawl across the screen. As the first notifications began to pop up, views, shares, stunned comments, one thing became clear. The story everyone thought they knew was about to change, and not everyone in power would be ready for what happened next.